So a lot of the stories that I've been telling over the last few years have all been reflections of hardships or conflicts that I've been going through myself. My name is Jamie Buchanan and I'm a filmmaker. I'm a trained dancer, used to be an actor for a while and performer. Between all of those bases, I kind of just these days consider myself to be really a storyteller. I've basically been using art as a way to tell my own stories and to join the dots mentally for myself as I process hardship. I've come to realise recently that that's not quite sustainable. As I use this as a tool to move forward, as I move into periods of my life that I'm a lot more stable and a lot happier and just kind of start to feel centered in my own life, I'm realizing I still have that itch to tell stories, but no one really wants to know how great my coffee tasted this morning. And it's frustrating for me because it wasn't always like this.
Imagination for me is some form of escapism, but it's also an extension of reality almost.
Suddenly I wake up and open my
Imagination to me feels more like the different colors I see.
Imagination is constantly with me throughout the day. I'm constantly sort of living in it, mostly when I'm not trying to think.
Darkness and silence, the walls are closing in. They leave me breathless like life surrounding me.
Reflecting on this and reflecting on how my brain used to work, I find it really strange that I am now struggling to come up with stories and to feel like I have things to say and to generate these new worlds to take people into again. Although I am very specific with certain areas of my practice now, I would always say that I've been a storyteller. When I was a child, I was always telling stories.
I put the sun on me.
I was always inventing worlds, I was always drawing maps, I was always making costumes and props out of things I found in a cupboard or tools out of scraps in the garden. Anything and anything could have a story if I wanted it to be.
It's just something that ignites your head, or a burst of something is all I can really think of. I'm quite a visual learner, thinker person. I always make scenarios in my head when I'm improvising, even very stupid ones, like I'm gonna draw out a chopping board and I'm gonna cut tomato and then I'm gonna be the tomato and it's all juicy and then we're gonna change it. It's stuff like that. Yeah, that feeds into my imagination, which therefore feeds into my movement.
To be a dancer and a performer requires quite a lot of energy. It's early starts. It's trained at very antisocial times to get to classes where you have to be really with it, really switched on mentally, really focused, really physical. And I think because of that, people do what they can to find inspiration in the moment.
I'm not one of these people who sort of get up and get into the studio and I'm just inspired. I tend to like working more. I tend to get inspired by achieving things.
I really enjoy getting out of bed to know that I'm gonna move and train and use my body.
I would say my primary inspiration is music. I like working to music, I like being creative to music, I like just listening to it to get me through the day, and it can be all different types and it can be anywhere, but it always makes everything feel a little bit more special.
I really enjoy waking up to the sunshine and just kind of being interested in the kind of shades and like the moods that come with it when I wake up. Like I definitely think my outlook of the day is very much rooted in the first thing or the first kind of like shade of light I'm woken up with.
In my spare time when I'm thinking about filmmaking, I'm thinking about equipment, I'm thinking about role models, I'm thinking about social media engagement. What's the next piece of equipment I need to buy? How do I save that? What projects will fund that? I'm constantly exposing myself to the practicalities and motivating myself to get through the next day of this creative profession nocturnal lifestyle sort of thing. I live in London, and it's this constant rhythm of work, hustle, create. There's always the urge to do the next thing, to be on the next project, because like if you're not, then kind of why are you here? So in this lifestyle that requires so much energy, that requires so much inspiration, such as music or caffeine or something to get myself moving, I find that I end up having to use a lot of things that exist in the real world every day to generate the energy to get creating. And I can't help but wonder if that's partially what informs my imagination.
Please keep my feet on the ground, 'cause one is on the floor and the other one on Mars. Gravity, 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 gravity. When you crash me to the ground, my mind leads orbiting all around the giant Milky Way, Milky Way.
When I started dancing at 3. They would use a lot of imagery, and I think that's such a beautiful way to communicate with a child. Like, why do you remove that at some point in their life? Like, why does it just have to happen in a studio or just have to happen in art class?
When I dance at home, it's very recreational. When I dance here, it feels very purposeful or like professional.
When someone says to me, use your imagination, I immediately sort of shut down a little bit. I'm like, well, how do I do that?
Imagination has definitely changed since I was a kid. I would definitely say that I need to relearn imagination. It's sort of learning now how to remove the barriers that I've been put in place or I've been inadvertently taught.
I guess the common question to ask, maybe at this point, is how do I get that back? That being the childlike state of wonder and creativity and imagination. But I wonder whether it's simpler than that. If imagination is simply the result of how we've conditioned our minds over the last few years, then maybe the question we should be asking is simply, how do I let that back in?
The earth's not on inheritance or something that they've lost for us. Our children lent to us with trust. If the ocean could complain, would say,
I don't think imagination is this thing that busy-brained, creative people have in abundance, way more than the average person that we utilize in order to be creative and come up with these new ideas and things. Our creativity is the product of training, of honing skills, of learning how to think in a certain way in a certain set of conditions. It's why I've been able to be creative around trauma and hardship and everything over the last few years. Like that's what creativity is. And imagination isn't also this like messy ball of string or yarn that we've been able to detangle over the years with proper discipline and education and adulthood and aspiration. Because if it was, and this was the desired outcome, then we wouldn't be searching for how to get it back now.
I've grown up being told I'm quite like away with the fairies and I process things differently, I assume.
What it is far more beautiful and far more elusive and far more optimistic and far more dangerous and just far more difficult to pin down than any of those things. I think it can be cultivated, not like a garden or an English rosebush or something ordered like that. I think it's more like a meadow or a poison ivy that you know what you're putting in, but you don't always know what you'll get out.
It can be dark, it can be worry. Imagine if we went into lockdown again.
It is a space for playing.
It's pushing past the limits of reality as such.
I believe our imagination asks questions whilst providing answers to them simultaneously. And so it's the product of what we ask ourselves on a daily basis.
We're really on the cusp of like pre-phone generation, very different to the children now. And I definitely think that changes our perception and our realisation of imagination.
I think whatever it is, whatever form it takes, imagination springs forth when our brain is busy and idle and there's the space for it to come to wriggle out. And it kind of bursts forth like the source of a stream or a river. I think, though, the direction that the stream takes can be shaped by us in the form of what mental rocks it needs to navigate its way around, or what mud that we have sat there that it needs to clean out before it can run and we can think freely. I believe that the meander that our imagination takes is the product of what we actively cognitively engage in. So sure, if I wanted to carry on the way that I am now, in this rut that I feel like I'm kind of in, I could continue to follow other artists obsessively on Instagram, or I could follow videographers on YouTube, or I could continue to be obsessed with tutorials and filmmaking techniques. I could fill my head with all of the practicalities of everyday life. Or I could start telling myself bedtime stories again. I could start drawing maps and imagining worlds. I could start looking for fairies when I'm running through the woods instead of keeping my eyes glued down to my Strava. Because I can't help but wonder, if I start to engage with my imagination again like I did when I was younger, if I start to look for my next mission and not my next job, or if I was to just take a few really active, deliberate steps to just try and believe in magic again that little bit more, I can't help but wonder what stories I might start to tell then.
Have you seen those leaves on the ground? They are the